I would like to thank Bryony Fair for her introduction and Mark Godfrey for inviting me today. In this paper, I consider the role and place of chance in Richter's overpainted photographs. The overpainted photographs are hybrid works. They are composed of small photographs, usually taken by Richter in private contexts, such as family life or holidays, which have been reworked with oil paint. They are also rather unusual works for three reasons. Firstly, the photographs used by Richter are often banal and of poor quality. Secondly, contrary to the tradition of hand-painted or retouched photographs, the paint is not applied by the artist with a conventional brush. The paint used is, in fact, as we've seen earlier, what is left over from Richter's daily work on his large abstract paintings. It has been scraped from the canvas and remains on the long blade used to this effect for up to 3 days without drying. The photograph is then dragged through or pressed upside down on the blade full of leftover paint colors, apparently leaving the final result to chance. Interestingly, chance also seems to be at the origin of the overpainted photographs. Richter recounts how, when painting from photographs to make photo paintings, paint would always drip onto the prints. Richter's first experimentations with paint on photographs can be found as early as 1967 in Atlas, his ongoing record of photographs and sketches. In panel 53, for instance, a photograph of Hamburg has been sprinkled with drops of blue paint. However, the first overpainted photographs as works appeared in 1989. Since then, there have been an ongoing project for Richter, and one that I believe enacts something fundamental to Richter's œuvre as a whole. That is, the idea that representation, however challenged it may be, remains a relevant category to his work. This paper aims to clarify the role of chance in the creative process of the overpainted photographs. This process was recently described by American art historian Susan Laxton as something entirely independent from artistic intention, where paint is applied blindly on the photographs. On the contrary, I would like to argue that in the overpainting process, chance is, in fact, a controlled factor. My starting point is a paradox. The overpainted photographs look as if they had been produced by chance. Yet the paint also takes on mimetic aspects and often seem to play with the representational elements present in the photograph. The two questions that will guide this paper will therefore be as follows. If on the one hand, the overpainted photographs have been produced by chance, how can their mimetic aspect be so expressive and attuned to the photograph's content? If, on the other, they have not been produced using chance, how can their spontaneous appearance, this chance effect, which pertains to the works, be accounted for? In order to answer these questions, I first propose to look at Richter's own understanding of chance, not as blind automatism, but on the model of a specific natural process. I will then go on to consider chance as it appears phenomenologically in the overpainted photographs themselves, and try to account for its puzzling coexistence with representation. The question of chance in relation to the overpainted photographs is not a new one. In fact, most critics would agree with art historian and curator Stefan Gronert that, I quote, chance plays a crucial role in the creation process. The main reason for this is, as we have just seen, simply the fact that Richter doesn't paint on the photographs himself. Rather, the photographs get overpainted through specific technical manipulations. Yet the idea that the finished works are the sole result of blind chance, that is, of a machine-like process entirely independent of the artist's intention, is problematic. In fact, a close scrutiny of some of the overpainted photographs makes us wonder to what extent chance is used in the making process. Let us take one example. In this entitled overpainted photograph, Richter's wife is wearing a white dress with green flowery print. Her head rests on her left hand and is slightly turned to her right, her green eyes wide open, as if something had caught her attention. The paint, red, white, and green, looks as if it had been smeared randomly on the photograph. Yet at the same time, it is used as a framing device, both in the way it is applied to the snapshot, physically framing the eyes of the woman, and in the colors used, which match the green of the eyes. In turn, the eyes seem to have been colored with a touch of red paint, as if to match the smeared red that frames them. All these elements point to the fact that the role of chance, if any, has been strictly delimited. I would like to suggest that looking at Richter's own conception of chance will allow us to refine our understanding of the role it plays in the creation process of the overpainted photographs. Chance is a theme that crops up repeatedly in Richter's writings and interviews, defined as a compositional tool always connected to nature. Let us consider two quotes by Richter. Using chance is like painting nature, but which chance event out of all the countless possibilities? And second quote, painting like nature, painting as change, becoming, emerging, being there, thusness, without a name and just as right, logical, perfect, and incomprehensible. End of quote. What is striking here is that the expressions painting nature and painting like nature, instead of referring to depicted contents, such as landscapes or seascapes, are used to introduce the problem of chance. Jacques Monod's essay of popular science, Chance and Necessity, is key to understanding what Richter means by chance and nature, as both means and analogy for his creative process. A major influence on Richter, this book has helped him see chance, as he tells Benjamin Buchloh in an interview, as, I quote, a generalized factor, something entirely positive, rather than a shortcoming on his part. Monod's book provides a typology of three modalities of chance: essential chance, operational chance, and radical uncertainty. In this paper, I will consider essential chance and operational chance in turn as possible ways to understand the working of chance in Richter's overpainted photographs. So firstly, essential chance. According to Monod, essential chance is at work in particular biological mechanisms, such as the creation of antibodies. Antibodies are proteins that have the capacity to recognize and neutralize substances that are foreign to the organism, such as bacteria. As is commonly known, antibodies are able to recognize a foreign substance, called an antigen, only after an original meeting with this substance, through vaccination, for instance. The body is theoretically able to produce antibodies to cope with any type of foreign organism. The question is, what is the source of information that enables the antibody to synthesize its specific structure? It was previously supposed that the antibody derived this information from the antigen itself. However, recent discoveries show that it is not the case. Rather, a combined dynamic of chance and selection is responsible for the process. Specialized cells are randomly produced in great numbers in total ignorance of the structure of the antigen. The antigen then selects those cells that produce an antibody capable of recognizing it. Monod writes, "It is clear a posteriori that only such a source as chance could be rich enough to supply the organism with means to repel attack from any quarter." The example of antibodies therefore emphasizes the creative potential of chance, but it also shows that the body's chance mechanism only becomes efficient thanks to the selection process that follows it. This theoretical model of spontaneous generation, followed by a selection process, can be used to describe the creation of the overpainted photographs. In particular, the question of selection, or judgment, is crucial for Richter, who is concerned, as we have seen, with the tension between the countless possibilities of chance in nature and the selection that he, as an artist, has to make. Richter writes, I quote, "The problem is this, not to generate any old thing with all the rightness and spontaneity of nature, but to produce highly specific pictures with highly specific messages. Were it not for this, painting would be the simplest thing in the world, since in nature any old blot is perfectly right and correct." End of quote. In this sense, the making of the overpainted photographs can be seen as a strange balancing act between nature's spontaneity and artistic judgment, always exercised a posteriori. Indeed, according to Richter's critic O.W.M. Schneider, I quote, "Any decisions that are not subject to chance are not taken until after the overpainting process, and then Richter's skepticism starts to reappear. Anything that has not succeeded is immediately eliminated. Then a strict selection process follows a few weeks later." End of quote. The artist's aesthetic judgment is not replaced by chance, but only displaced to a later moment in the creative process. The final photographs are not, therefore, the sole result of blind chance. The paradigm of essential chance we have just seen is useful to think about the creative process of the overpainted photographs. However, it is not entirely satisfactory. Some of the overpainted photographs display a balance between the artist's intention and the logic of the materials involved that is closer to another modality of chance, what Jacques Monod has called operational chance. This term refers to the chance of the dice and roulette, which is due to the practical impossibility of controlling the roll of the dice or ball. Therefore, this type of chance is not essential, but only operational. If a highly precise throwaway were invented, writes Monod, the uncertainty of the result could be controlled. Instead of chance as a complex process inherent to nature structure, here chance can be thought of as a more or less controllable factor. A reading of Richter's practice according to essential chance has shown that the artist's intention was displaced to the moment of selection, after the overpainting has taken place. The operational chance paradigm, on the other hand, suggests that the artist's intention may also be present before and while the overpainting is taking place. Chance, according to this paradigm, is reduced to the lack of control and precision due to the way Richter applies the paint onto the snapshots. With this in mind, let us turn back to the entitled overpainted photograph we considered earlier. Although in almost all of the overpainted photographs, as in this work, the overpaintings obtained by dragging and pressing down are always in part determined by the paint that has accumulated on the blade that day. It is likely that in this case, and in other cases too, Richter has played with the colors and patterns existing on the blade, and also selected the photograph accordingly. Let us now look at a further example, which is part of a series of overpainted photographs originally taken by Richter in Sils in the Upper Engadine in Switzerland. Entitled Fextel Pièce la Grève, this work is composed of a photograph of a snowy landscape, in which bits of rocks and fir trees are partially covered in off-white snow. The paint, light blue and pink, has not been applied by pressing the photograph on a blade, but has been sprinkled over the surface of the print in a way that is reminiscent of snow falling. In this work, as in the rest of the series, Richter has clearly used the pastel colors, but also the sprinkling technique, knowingly, in order to play with the photograph scenery. This brings me to a second observation, which is that the sheer diversity of the techniques used by Richter, here the sprinkling of the paint, the dragging through the paint of the untitled photograph we saw just previously, and in other works, the pressing down into the paint, also called the monotype technique, makes manifest the artist's choice between several options of handling the paint and the photograph. Each of these choices will condition, if not determine, the final result. This factual evidence undermines the idea that the process is essentially left to chance. Finally, the emphasis on the technical aspect also gestures towards the artist's savoir-faire and in his manipulations of both media. To summarize, we can say that the operational chance paradigm enables us to think of Richter's careful consideration and manipulations in the handling of the paint as a process that is still open to the surprises of chance. Chance in this case is reduced to the lack of control and precision due to the way Richter applies the paint on the snapshots, and is compatible with the mimetic effect we observed in the two overpainted photographs we have just considered. But here, we must pause a minute to consider the paradox inherent to the overpainted photographs, which I outlined in my introduction. We have just seen that the role of chance in the production of the overpainted photographs is controlled and even manipulated by Richter, which account for the mimetic effects we observed in some of the works. However, when faced with the overpainted photographs, the viewer is likely to be struck as well by what I would call chance effects. I would argue that there is a disjunction between the actual role chance plays in the creative process of the overpainted photographs and the effect they have on us as viewers, where they never cease to bring chance to mind and to pretend, and sometimes convince us, that they are engaging with pure chance. This is all the most striking in the overpainted photographs of landscapes. My last example, entitled Miot Selvas, Pis Gus, Pis Lad, which belongs to the Seal series as well, is a picture made from the photograph of a mountain on which the snow has partly melted. The upper part of the picture is already in the shade, making most of the snow on the mountain appear blue rather than white. Dark blue, grey, and white paint has been smeared in the center of the picture. The paint not only mirrors the colors already present in the photograph, but also gives the impression of the mountain melting into an avalanche of uncontained paint. The avalanche is a typical example of chance at the art of nature. It is hard to predict, it has no aim, no meaning in itself. But the seemingly randomness of the paint is precisely also what allows us to transfer meaning into it. That of the violence of an avalanche, perhaps, or even the sheer uncanny appearance of the dissolving mountain. The very moment we look at this picture in this way, we add some value to the paint. The paint becomes a force that deconstructs representation. But what is most interesting in this work is that we only experience the full dimension of the mountain when it is challenged by the smeared paint. In this case, the paint does not only dissolve the representation of the mountain, it also moves it from a postcard-like representation to that of a natural environment in all its scope and force. To summarize and to conclude, I have tried to give in this paper an interpretation of chance in the overpainted photographs that would account for rather than deny the mimetic aspects of these works. We have seen that Richter grounded his practice in the conception of nature as spontaneous creativity. The paradigm of essential chance and subsequent selection in nature proved useful to emphasize the role of the artist's judgment in the making process of the overpainted photographs. But a close reading of two of these works showed that in some cases the paint is manipulated in order to interact knowingly with the existing representations. I concluded with the idea that whatever the creation process, the finished overpainted photographs never cease to convince us that they engage with pure chance. This chance effect is particularly noticeable in the landscape-based photographs. In the last overpainted photograph we considered, the paint is seen as the interruption of a peaceful snowscape and stirs up nature's violence. As it does so, the randomness is automatically converted into meaning. Chance, representing itself, is always in the end representation. Richter's overpainted photographs continue to disrupt our effort to pin a definite meaning on them, yet at the same time never permit themselves to be surrendered to pure arbitrariness. Thank you.